Ethiopia is a landlocked country in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is the oldest independent country in Africa and one of the oldest in the world. It is strategically proximate to the Middle East and Europe, together with its easy access to the major ports of the region, enhances its international trade. It is bordered by Sudan in the west, Somalia and Djibouti in the east, Eritrea in the north, and Kenya in the south. Ethiopia covers 472,000 square miles, making it roughly as large as France and Spain combined. Ethiopia represents a melting pot of ancient cultures with Middle Eastern and African cultures. Addis Ababa is the educational and administrative center of Ethiopia. It is the site of Addis Ababa University and contains several teaching, training colleges, and technical schools. Most of Ethiopia's service industries are also located in the city. Banking and insurance services are concentrated in Addis Ababa. The bulk of the export and import trade of Ethiopia is channeled through Addis Ababa. The city is also the collection and distribution center for much of the country's international trade. Ethiopia has a long history that is still playing out to this day. By 100 AD, a kingdom called Aksum rose in Ethiopia, influenced by southern Arabia. In 642, the Arabs conquered Egypt. In 698 to 700, they took Tunis and Carthage, and soon they controlled all coasts of North Africa. The Arabs were Muslims, and soon the whole coast of North Africa converted to Islam. Ethiopia remained Christian, but it was cut off from Europe by the Muslims. In the Middle Ages, Ethiopia flourished. In the 16th century, Ethiopia declined in power and importance, but it survived. At that time, the Portuguese reached Ethiopia by sea. In 1848, the Emperor of Ethiopia imprisoned British subjects, and the British sent an expedition to rescue them. The British then withdrew. In the late 19th century, the Europeans divided Africa up between them. Soon all of Africa was in European hands except Liberia and Ethiopia. The Italians invaded Ethiopia in 1896, but they were defeated by the Ethiopians at the Battle of Adwa. In 1923, Ethiopia joined the League of Nations. Then in 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia. They soon overran Ethiopia. In 1941, the British liberated Ethiopia. Emperor Haile Selassie was restored to his throne. In 1974, communists seized power in Ethiopia and the emperor was deposed and murdered. Led by Montesquieu, the communists introduced a tyrannical regime. The communist regime in Ethiopia was then overthrown in 1991. In Ethiopia, a new constitution was introduced in 1994, and the elections were held in 1995. Today, Ethiopia remains a poor and overwhelmingly agricultural country. With about 115 million people, Ethiopia is the second most populous nation in Africa after Nigeria and still the fastest growing economy in the region, with 6.3% growth since 2020. Over the past 15 years, Ethiopia's economy has been among the fastest growing in the world. However, it is still one of the poorest, with a per capita gross national income of $890. Ethiopia's GDP growth slowed down in 2020 and further in 2021 due to COVID-19, with growth of industry services nearing single digits. However, agriculture, where over 70% of the population are employed, was not significantly affected by COVID-19, and its contribution to growth slightly improved in 2020 compared to the previous year. The consistently high economic growth over the last decade has resulted in positive trends in poverty reduction in both urban and rural areas. 41% of the GDP is agriculture, which also makes up about 80% of exports and 80% of the labor force. Coffee is the largest foreign export earner. It is also the second biggest maize producer in Africa. An interesting fact that we learned from the restaurant that we ate at is that all Starbucks coffee comes from Ethiopia.
For our cultural site visit, our group visited a local Ethiopian restaurant here in Dallas-Fort Worth called Yegna Juice Mart. This restaurant is owned and operated by Nagasi and Brooke Giza, a mother and son team that originally came from Ethiopia. Both of them were extremely welcoming and kind enough to sit and talk with us for a long time. They even helped us order off a menu that included items that none of us had ever heard of. We ordered and ate as a group, which is the cultural norm for Ethiopian cuisine. The main dish that we got was called beef tips, a dish that consists of strips of beef marinated in a sour and spicy tomato sauce with onions. The food also came with a type of bread called injera, which is a cold, sourdough-like flatbread that is served with almost every meal and is typically used in place of utensils to eat the food. Along with the food, the restaurant had decorations that were from Ethiopia, including a set of lowered table and chairs that is more typical of an Ethiopian restaurant.
In general, Ethiopia is one of the more corrupt countries in the world. While their rank on the CPI scale has risen over the past few years, from usual over 110th for the past 20 years to now ranking 87th, there are still issues with corruption that companies operating in the country must be aware of. One of the ways that this widespread corruption comes into play is through the widespread use of facilitation payments. Due to weak enforcement over 60-year-old commercial code, corruption and business practices have run rampant. There are plenty of areas in Ethiopian culture where corruption is through the roof. There is a high risk of corruption in Ethiopia's land administration. Ethiopians pay bribes to land administration officials left and right. These officials can get away with this because there is no clear policies and transparency throughout the administration. Officials have also taken part in forgery practices as well as assigning themselves an estimated 15,000 titles illegally. Only a few are held accountable. There is also very high risk of corruption in tax administration. Businesses must bribe and give irregular payments to tax officials to stay in business. This is part of the norms in Ethiopia, which is a huge problem. Companies rank tax regulation as a problematic factor for doing businesses, which in turn has impaired investment and economic growth in Ethiopia. There is no type of policy or accountability when it comes to these administrations in Ethiopia, which is a huge part of why the country is so corrupted. Another high risk of corruption is the police in Ethiopia, which is not something you want to be corrupted. Ethiopia acts as if the rules do not apply to them, and they can do whatever they want. Businesses do not have faith in Ethiopian police to protect them from crime. Businesses are forced to pay for their own security, and the police of Ethiopia are known to ask for bribes to get what they want, or the citizens will pay the consequences. However, after working to improve the country's ranking on the World Bank's ease of doing business scale, the country recently adopted amendments to the commercial codes that will align their government with the more modern business practices and structures seen in other parts of the world. Ethiopia has made some major strides in mitigating corruption in their country. The Ethiopian government has established various anti-corruption institutions along with federal and regional ethics. The Governance and the Democratic Participation Programs, or GDPP, provided FEACC with a range of policy and institutional support focused on enhancing transparent and accountable systems of governance and strengthening national efforts in the fight against corruption. The program has also been promoting evidence-based interventions to ensure greater impact in the anti-corruption work being carried out both at the federal and regional level.
So now we're here to talk about the different people we interviewed that were from Ethiopia. First, Ergio Bogalesh. He was born in the US like his mother, while his father is from Ethiopia. Ergio has been in Ethiopia 2 times to visit family members and talked to me about how he instantly noticed differences on the lifestyle that he was living here in the US compared on how his cousins were living over there in Ethiopia. Ergio also talked about the eating traditions, like how they always eat in big groups and how meals were meant to be shared, and how people in Ethiopia did not use utensils to eat, like a spork or a spoon. Then Kirubal Taye, a native Ethiopian who moved to America and currently lives in Austin, Texas, working as a software developer for Grubhub. Kirubal spoke a lot about the cultural differences in America and Ethiopian countries, and how the more expressive attitudes of Americans was difficult for Ethiopians to initially adjust to. Then Negasi Jisa. We got a more in-depth description of the corrupt Ethiopian government from her point of view. She explained to us how Ethiopia has gone from a king to communist to a democratic government over time. It was interesting when she described how the education system of Ethiopian culture and history is so different from generation to generation, such as her parents and her son know very different history than she does because of the government constantly changing. She told us that Ethiopia was never colonized, which was very interesting. Brooke, Negasi's son, he is only 12 years old, so he did not know much about the corruption in Ethiopia because he was born in America. However, he is very aware of his culture and the issues Ethiopia faces each and every day. He explained that the Ethiopian government is not fair to their citizens because the country is not very developed and they have to do what they can do to get by. Brooks said his course of action would be to make sure all officials and police are fair and honest, which would decrease corruption.
In conclusion, from everybody that we've spoken to about Ethiopia, the people seem to love their country and want the best for it. They were all extremely kind and willing to speak about what they loved about their country and where it falls short to serve its people. Even though they may be dismayed about the current state, their hope for the future and the ability for the country to make a turnaround was evident.